We're going to be talking about Manchester United, Keith. Their projected record revenue of £660 million. What's the likely driving force behind that? And are you expecting those numbers to be revealed soon?
Yeah, look, I think the return to Champions League is the main driver behind the increase in the commercials for them. I don't think there were any major other commercial deals that were unusual or exceptional, or they broke a new market in any way. I think it was back down to actually success on the pitch and getting into the Champions League. We know that ultimately wasn't that successful, but still, that's where the revenue numbers would have come from for that increase.
And you've mentioned, I mean, many times, Keith, over previous weeks, Sir Jim Ratcliffe watch, you've been keeping a close eye on his dealings. Can you give him credit for these successes and for that revenue? Or actually, will that be down to other external factors?
No, I mean, he was never involved at the club at that time, so he can take no benefit or credit for that at all. That was, last year's qualifications to Champions League, which happened the year before. So that's a long time before for Ratcliffe. So no, he can take no credit on that. What he's got to do now is try and sort out the mess he's got, which is on many, many fronts. And as I say, he's got a lot to say at the moment, and we've got to see what actions come through rather than words.
We saw, Keith, some sort of key personnel across football wishing the Three Lions luck going into their Euro final game. And one thing that Sir Jim Ratcliffe actually mentioned was for Luke Shaw to not pull his hamstring during the game. Does that pick up on what you're saying there? What did you make of that sort of, I would say, sarcastic comment to sort of wrap up the video?
That's exactly what I was talking about. Is I just felt there was absolutely no need. I didn't see any other owners saying something like that. And rather than just even a good luck sort of, good luck, hope you do well, saying, oh, look, come back, don't pull your hamstring. I thought that was really poor, to be honest. And, I just didn't think there was a need for it. And I'm sure he'll learn as days go on that owners and, executives at clubs they all learn sad lessons. I've learned mine over the time as well, that while you think it's good to keep communicating, it isn't. You communicate properly with your fans in a certain way. But throwing these ad hoc little, sound bites out isn't the way to go forward. And I just thought he's got to learn his lesson on this. And he can't start speaking about everything that's going on because he didn't add any value to it. And I thought he made himself look silly.
There were some reports as well that there are going to be some heavy early year losses potentially within that revenue. What does that then mean for their PSR status, Keith? And are there any concerns for the club over the next few weeks and months for them with sanctions?
Well, the interesting number in there is, I think it's between 35 and 40 million that have been sort of assessed on the charges around the transaction when Ratcliffe bought the Glazer shares. Now, the club have ended up paying that 35 to 40 million when it's purely been the Glazers who have benefited from the sale of their shares. And I find it very hard to understand why that could be allowed. When it's, as I say, it's for the Glazers' benefit. It wasn't for the club's benefit. And loading that onto the club does seem wrong. Now, I'm presuming that they've had that cleared by the Premier League, which raises other questions, or maybe not yet. I don't know. And that's what we've got to see. But I keep a close eye on that because that seems wrong, that those sort of charges can be passed on. Now, if they are not approved, and that still may be the case, then it would bring them very close to a PSR breach. And so we're going to have to watch this closely. So, they haven't got unlimited resources, but they should be not breaching these sort of things. And certainly 40 million being lumped onto the club rather than being paid by the Glazers or Ratcliffe himself, either party, around a share transaction does not seem like a legitimate football expense to me.
And we saw recently, talking of budgets, actually, they signed Joshua Zirkzee for £36 million, I should say, on a 5-year deal. What do you make of that news, Keith? And do you feel that he will be a good signing for Erik ten Hag and the club?
Well, it's like Man United's becoming very Dutch, isn't it? You got Ruud van Nistelrooy behind the scenes as well, coming at the same time. It's just becoming very, very Dutch. I don't know enough about Zirkzee. I've looked at his numbers and seen what he's done. I think he's actually got a chance. I think he seems to be quite a talented young player. Again, it will depend on how Ten Hag sees him, but with a Dutch manager, you think he'll get the best out of him. The problem, of course, then becomes overall is if they are becoming a very Dutch type team, can they get rid of Ten Hag at some stage? There's been a lot of talk that he's got one more season. And it was handled very badly, as we saw before this new season started. So we're going to have to see. But, you start becoming overloaded with one culture. It's very hard for you to get back to another culture. which also, if you see this week, we have the new CEO coming in, Omar Barada, coming in from City. Now, he's been charged with bringing back the old Man United culture. Now, around the Fergie type era sort of thing. Now, I find that very strange. I mean, if you can imagine a Rangers chief executive trying to, do that with Celtic, and here we have a City chief executive trying to do it with Man United, and then you've got the Dutch culture happening at the same time, you're setting yourself up again for a mix internally of factions and different problems to go ahead. So again, I'm watching this I'm shaking my head because I see a lot of issues that are going to manifest themselves down the road, and I'm keeping a close eye, as you know, on how Radcliffe's handling this. But so far, all I'm seeing is potential problems being created.
If we pick up on that generally then, Keith, looking at their potential sanction, if the Premier League are to potentially look at that, 35 million pounds that you mentioned, what could that then lead them to? And how would that impact them for this summer? If we know they're on a tight spending budget, if they're close to a PSR breach, do you think that would have been their sort of key signing? Xerxes is the key signing for the summer?
Well, it seems that's what's going to happen. Now, again, we come back to the Dan Ashworth question. Now, the reason I say that is because if Dan had been in place earlier, which we've already talked about, then there may have been a lot more departures from United, and so there would not have been anywhere near a breach because the players would have been out, the wages would have been cut, etc. But for whatever reason, and we've discussed this, Sir Jim did not decide to go into a room and negotiate for Dan Ashworth, although he finally did, but he did it too late. So it may end up being that Xerxes is the prime signing this summer because they've missed that window earlier, which we did talk about and mention to them and pointed it out. So another consequence of, I think, making wrong decisions.
You've just watched a segment from Football Insider's brand new podcast, The Inside Track, with me, Lewis Pearce, alongside the guests on the show. Thanks very much for tuning in. Please do give the video a like, comment your thoughts on the topic, and feel free to share on your social media pages. If you want to listen to the full podcast episode, click the link in the description below. Keep your eyes peeled for plenty more content and exclusives here on The Inside Track.